Welcome to the Urgency of Awareness podcast. I'm Jody Farr.
And I'm your girl, Nita Renee.
Join us as we gain new awareness of our personal experience.
And the experiences of others.
You know it. So that together we can build our capacity, bring it into the relationships we have.
Work lives.
Yes, and the community.
Let's go.
Hey listeners, have you ever been talking to a coworker, friend, or you're at a party and this person's telling you a story and maybe it's a little bit about themselves too, but in this story they're telling you, they reveal one of their identities that you didn't know about. But upon hearing this identity that they just revealed to you, it makes you go, ever happened to you? Come on in, let's talk about it. Welcome listeners. So I want to do a little recap because if you're like me, really don't know what I did yesterday, much less of when I listened to an episode last week or the week before. So we've been talking about that you and I, Miss Nita, we all live in a societal system that has normalized one identity over another. And societal systems always do this. They always go whoosh, they gear towards the normalized identity. So we used the example, I think in episode 1, if you're right-handed, you've had a societal system geared towards you. And so there's benefits to that. And what this leads to is two different experiences. Right-handed folks and left-handed folks, we've experienced the same societal system very differently. And of course, we give you some tools along the way. We talk about as we gain awareness, we have to hit the pause button. We also talked about it's not about either or. It's not about, either the right-hand experience is better or right or wrong, or the left-hand experience is better or right or wrong. We gotta put that judgment on the floor. It's about both and. Both the right-handed folks have had an experience in the societal system and the left-handed, and they're different, and it's okay. And can we increase our awareness so that we can build our capacity and hold both of those experiences, listen to them both? And of course, we broke down in one of those episodes the societal system, and we talked about how the societal system, it has individuals, institutions, communities, policies in it, and we often don't think systemically all the time, very hard to do. So we do have a primary focus, and we ask you, what one is your primary focus? And your primary focus, if it's individual, how does that show up at work? Because it does. It affects the questions we ask. It affects how we view a project. And you guys remember the tool there. Anything we do, whether it's initiative in a corporate setting or in the helping field, but any initiative we have, we want to ensure that we have people at the table who are looking at it from the individual lens, the institution, the community, and the policy. And now let's get started with today's episode. Miss Nita, how you doing today?
And it feels so good to be here with you,
right?
As always.
Right.
And I love how you recapped because, girl.
Right. You can never hear a tool too many times. And I don't remember what I did yesterday. Seriously, it takes me a minute to think about it.
And we talk about so much good stuff on our show that I'm glad that you made sure that we knew where we was at. Yes.
Okay, watch out, listeners. I've been with her a long time. Anytime she doesn't, yes, it means I'm going a different direction.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew you were.
I knew in a different direction.
I knew it. I was like, okay, she got something. What you got?
So I want to discuss the education and the language triangles, and I want to discuss them because these two hits home for me so good. With the girls that our team coaches, these are just like I really want to dive into those two.
Okay, let's do it. So listeners, we used in episode 1 and 2, we talked about left-handed, right-handed. And we, on page 34 and 35 in the book, I have a chart where a triangle on its base represents a normalized dominant identity, like right-handed. And then a triangle pointing down represents the identity that is not normalized. Yep. And so there's 18 triangle sets. So you're picking those two.
Yeah, I want to knock those two out.
So the one that we normalize then is formal education. And as I've said before, I present in many countries. So in the United States, what we mean with formal education is anything past the 12th grade.
Okay.
Right, anything past the 12th grade, if you go back, get associates or you get some certificate or you do, then that's getting into formal education.
Got you.
And what then is not normalized dominant is what I call informal education, or as my daddy said, life. Okay, so I come from informally educated.
Life.
Yeah, I come from life. Yes. Got a PhD in life, right? And then and I'm glad you brought up language then, because they intersect as well.
Yes.
Is in the United States, we normalize not just English, so English is the language we normalize. And then I put in the triangle pointing down, I put a lot of other languages. And I apologize, there's no way you can put all the world's language in a triangle, right? So I took what research says is the 5 most popular languages and put it in the triangle. But beyond that is we don't just normalize English, we normalize formal register. Now, I want to break that down to audience
Please do,
members.
because me and you had this conversation in your kitchen, because I'm like...
And when I break it down, listeners who listen to episode 1 and 2 would be like, "Oh, girl, you casual," right? Well, if they're gonna say that to me. And so, if Miss Nita's in formal register and I'm in casual register, now we're both in English, so we're both speaking English, but I'm in casual. I have 400 to 600, maybe 800 word vocabulary. So 400 to 600, 800 word vocabulary. So therefore, my word choice is very general, and in all honesty, we make words up. Every neighborhood across America that speaks casual register will make words up, right? And we don't have grammatically correct sentences. And so when I have to review the podcast before they go for air, I'm like, oh, Lord, that was a double negative. I just did. So audience members, I catch myself too. All right. But I grew up casual English. But we normalize formal register. Now, Miss Nita's speaking formal register and I'm speaking casual register. Again, both in English. She has 2 to 4 times my vocabulary. If Miss Nita's well-read like she is, then she has more than that. So think about how this affects the work you do. For some of us, if we're in law enforcement, education, even corporations, and I used to work construction, your management, many times to get into management, you got some formal education, but you come on the work site, you got a lot of folks in casual. And so if I'm coming to Miss Nita's office and she's speaking formal English and I'm at casual, I'm understanding in any given conversation 1/2 to 1/4 of what you got to say. So the emphasis in casual, and all humans, we read nonverbals, but in casual, we really focus on nonverbals. We really focus on the nonverbal because that's how we communicate. And now this is where the intersections of the triangles happen, is use economic class. We're dealing with stats and patterns. If you grew up middle class, think about your own blanket of life. If you grew up middle class or upper middle or wealthy, statistically speaking, there's a higher chance that you have formal English. If you grow up in, I say poverty or underclass, statistically speaking, there's a higher chance that you're more casual dominant. Now, to be honest, everybody has all the registers. We all have all the registers, but it's which one you're in predominantly. Right? And I have asked you before what you grew up in, because I grew up in casual. I was so casual, by the time I hit school, they put me in special ed real fast, right? Right? But what happens is, and when I work with organizations, I say, do you understand, if you grew up with casual English, very rarely do you ever get credit for the big concepts in your head. Because you have limited vocabulary.
Oh my gosh, I'm ready to talk about it.
Well, okay, then let me shut up and you go.
Because this is again, because of the girls that we work with, right? We work with primarily Black girls. And so the first thing that threw me when we had this conversation at your house was the register part, right? Yeah. The language, right? Never heard of English as a form of registry. Yeah. Right. So now in my head, I'm like, okay, she's saying register. I don't know what the heck she's talking about, but I'm just riding with this conversation. Yeah. Right. It really did not
click.
It did not click. Yes. Right. Then when you started talking about it, what came to me was the code switching. Yeah. Right. We are always, as Black women or as a Black person, let me say for myself, it's the whole, when I go out. So I was raised, not like my parents were middle class, but I have cousins who were raised in poverty, and we were all super close. Yes. So I have had the best of both worlds, being able to, what we say in our family is, dine with the president or hang with the homies. Yeah. Right. So, I'm able to, and for Blacks, it's always called Ebonics, right?
Yes.
We speak and it's looked down upon. So it's so cool how you're identifying it, because we all do have different languages that we speak within the English language.
Yeah, we have different registers. And we have them all. And I love what you said, code switch. I love when the academic world puts a term on what we just grow up doing. Exactly. So when you know how to you're well-versed in casual, and then you can turn around and be well-versed in formal, that's called code switching. The academics name that.
That's exactly what it came. When we said, she's talking about code switching.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, that's called living life, but yes. And so that's called that code switching.
Got
So it's
you.
all English, and different languages will have registers within them. But what happens is, like, we're gonna do a whole season on education.
So
Think about the
excited.
educational system. So many of our systems are normalized dominant and operate normalized dominant. That means unintentionally or intentionally, we value the experience of the normalized dominant. So if you come into an interview, well, we value that you said something grammatically correct and that you really had a large vocabulary. But where I come from, I don't put the emphasis on that because I don't have that, so I understand the struggle of that. And so I'll give the listeners a great example is one organization I worked with, in an attempt to not just operate on normalized dominant, they started making sure that all their interviews they did in their organization, they had someone from upper management, mid-management, and from the front line. They would do the interview. So all three had to be present to do the interview. And upper management said this taught us the most. And the one, she came back and she's a vice president of the organization. She said, Jody, we were interviewing someone and they used the F-bomb. Like, they used the F-bomb and just in a sentence and kept it going. I was done. I was like, okay, well, that's a wrap. You know, I smiled like, but we could really end this interview. You know, we're done here. And when we got back to discuss it, because it was all three of us, the person from the front line goes, you know what? I don't care if you have to pay that person more than me. We need that person. You pay them whatever we want. And she goes, the vice president goes, I thought that staff member was joking. I'm like, yeah, who cares if they want $1 million? Ho, ho, ho. Like, I thought it was a joke. And the front line goes, well, that's a little much, but yeah, we should pay them whatever they want. And so then the vice president goes, I realize, holy, you're serious. But didn't you hear they said the F-bomb? And she goes, the front line staff stopped and looked at me and said, but it was accurate. It was
Used in the right
place.
place.
It was placed in the right way. And they're like, so what? And then even mid-management said, yeah, I can coach someone not to curse. But the skill set that person was showing us, their decision making, their ability to maneuver, and the flexibility, that's harder for me to coach.
Yeah.
And so the vice president goes, oh my, we ended up hiring that person. And she goes, so far that person's been here 6 months and they're amazing.
Yeah.
But she goes, there's an example of how my normalized dominant experience would have made a decision instead and put value on, well, you said the F word, we're done here.
Yeah.
But it was because I had folks there with different experiences. So think about how you can use that in your own organization and as you do work. And so I know for myself, I can read people pretty fast, and because I get to go to some, you know, what I call uppity events, and so I can't always find that big word, or I'll mispronounce it. Ooh, if you haven't heard it, I will do it, you know, and so I will see people like all of a sudden be like, oh, we're gonna go over here, you know, take our little derv and walk over here. Because they put so much value on language.
That is so serious. Yeah. As the executive director, I find myself in rooms where it's like, I'll work hard to not diminish my presence because I'm nervous that I may be judged. Right.
Absolutely.
And I'm teaching girls to show up authentic. So I have to walk it. So that, I mean,
now I got to bring this to the listeners. So listeners, why does Miss Nita got to work so much harder than I do? Because she got to work hard. What'd you say? To
not diminish my presence.
To not diminish presence. Because take the race triangle and intersect it. Because we often assume that you are going to, if you are a person of color, that you're going to talk casual. And then we often assume if you are white, you're going to speak formal. And so I've heard many people, you've even talked about this, people who are of color, black, brown, talk about, I talked to someone on the phone, but then when they meet me, they're like, oh, which is now getting back to my question I asked the audience member. Because when they meet you, they heard formal register on the phone, so they assumed they were talking to someone of a certain skin color, white. And then when they meet that person, they're like, oh. You ever?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And so then the pressure, because we do that, the pressure then when Nita and I go to a party, you got more pressure on you. Or there's more people wanting to put you in a certain.
Yeah, I would say the latter.
Yeah,
because I'm moving out of it
yeah.
because of, again, like wanting to show up my full self. And so it's really like, okay, they're going to get this work. You know, like I'm going to put it back on them. Like, are they going to receive me for me? Or are they going to receive me for what they feel I should be, you know?
Right.
So.
And so that, listeners, God dang,
I know we winning today.
I'm telling you. So she just, Anita, you just hit the question. The question was, have you ever been talking to someone and then they reveal an identity about themselves that makes you go, huh? If that happens, what has probably occurred is in chapter 3, I call it the one picture phenomenon. So we all do it. So I always say, let defenses drop. I catch myself doing it, right? I talk about this stuff all day. And I still, when I catch myself doing it, I'm like, oh, I seriously did not just do that, right? So what we'll do is we'll take the normalized dominant triangles and we'll put them together to get one picture.
Yes.
Then we'll take, equally as powerful, we'll take the triangles pointing down and we'll put it together to get one picture. Yeah. And so think about it, Miss Nita, the triangle black, that's pointing down, right? Female, that's pointing down. And so people half expect her to speak casual because that's pointing down, right? And then when she doesn't, people are like, oh, right?
Or when I do, like you said, now they're diminishing the big concepts that I'm bringing to the table. Right. Because they've already painted this picture.
They already got that picture. Yeah. And you can tell when that happens.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
And so that one picture phenomenon, and it happens within a second. So I work in Memphis, and I was asked to work with the community. And so I'm pulling up to the community center where I'm going to work. And it's in a neighborhood that's in poverty. Okay. So I know that primarily I'm going to have a lot of participants in poverty. I'm pulling up, and as I turn into the parking lot, so I'm going real slow because I'm turning in. I'm actually behaving myself while I'm driving. There's a woman on a sidewalk, and she has to be about 400 pounds. Like, she's very, very large. And I immediately, now that's two triangles. So we're in a poverty neighborhood, and she's walking towards the front door, and she's got a body that is differently abled. I immediately go, oh, I bet you she's one of my participants today. Like, I did the one picture phenomenon that quick. And then I caught myself as I drive through the parking lot. I'm like, you did not just do that, Jody. Yes, I did. Oh my gosh. One picture phenomenon. When we got into the meet, she was in the meeting. But then when she's talking to me, she's oh yeah, she got her master's. She's working on her PhD. She's like, she got all these normalized dominant triangles. So as she's telling me her story, even though I had already caught myself with the one picture phenomenon, as she's telling me more and more the normalized dominant identity she has, I still was like, oh. I'm like, stop doing Jody. Oh my gosh. Right. So that's how powerful it is.
And we've been raised in this. So it's, I'm not going to say my age, but it's been years of undoing these, especially since me and you've been friends. Like, it's been we're born into this stuff.
Born into it, and even this is how much work it is. Even though I do this all the time, I still live out these, and so hitting the pause button is huge. Hitting the pause button.
We talked about that.
Right. Hitting that pause button and going, okay, Jody, why'd you just do that? And it's like, well, that's the power of the one picture phenomenon. But then I hit the pause button long enough to go, now don't act out of it. Because what happens if we're not aware is we start acting out of it. All of a sudden, I like what you said, I'm devaluing that person. Like the vice president said, they used the F word, so I'm thinking, well, we ain't hiring this person. So when we do the one picture phenomenon and we don't catch it, we either give more asset based if we think that person is all normalized dominant, or we start to give them more deficit, value.
Oh my gosh. It's so real.
That's how quickly. And the other way it happens is when it always kind of cracks me up when someone who has a lot of normalized dominant triangles commits a horrible crime. People seem to be more shocked. You know what I mean? And part of that's the one picture phenomenon.
Yes.
Like, because once, you're formally educated, you speak formal English, you're a able-bodied male, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, you did what? You have the criminal background. And suddenly that's a bigger, right? and so realizing that we do it, we'll take the normalized dominant, put them together, and then we'll do it the other way as well. Yeah. So I love that you brought up those two triangles.
Yeah. I mean, it's important because the girls that we work with, we're giving them these tools early.
That's so
and great. A part of what I loved about what you said and giving these girls the tools as the adults, when you talk about pressing the pause button, it's one thing to catch ourselves, right? Like, but I loved how you continued on with the work. because it wasn't just pausing to be like, come on now, Jody, did you just do that? But it's also, okay, now let me not do it again. Let me open myself up. Let me give myself capacity now to really receive this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, literally, we can't, I know for me and my team, we can't give it these things to the girls, these tools to the girls, open them up and not be doing the work
ourselves, right?
We
Which
have to be the
for
examples.
audience members, I don't know if we talked about, but that's one of the places where Nita and I overlap when she's in the schools working with young girls. What she was hearing is the girls were like, hey, we're learning these skills, we're becoming more aware, we're hitting the pause button, our emotional intelligence is increasing, we're building our capacity, but now we don't have an adult ally.
Yes.
Because as adults, we weren't necessarily gaining new awareness. And so then I would start working with the adults in that space.
Yes.
And saying, hey, you got young people working on this, so we have to be working on it so that when they do need to hit the pause button and process even more, they can come in and go, hey, Miss Johnson, hey, can I take a break? Can I take a breather? And they'll know what they mean.
They understand it on a larger level.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
But then for listeners, all those tools we covered in the first 2 episodes are just essential, because awareness is just step 1. Like that's a baby step. Like, okay, awareness. I just driving in and going, oh, I just did the one picture phenomenon. Like I caught it, and that's beautiful. Because sometimes, let's be honest, not that many years ago, I would have drove in, I would have been like, oh, she's a participant. And I would have had built a whole story about her in my head.
Whole story.
Oh, I would have been like, hey, that girl unemployed, and I bet you my taxes are paying for some stuff. And, on a bad day, I could go there, and then what does that slide into? That slides into either or. Like that slides into my experience is the right experience, and that experience is the wrong.
Come on.
right?
And it could have totally affected how you presented at that point.
How I show up. I would have had limited, like you said,
yes.
I would have had limited capacity. So when she spoke, I wouldn't have really listened. I would have, cut her off a little.
You devalued everything she was saying.
Things.
PhD.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah. And not in a rude way, but in a very subtle way.
Absolutely.
Very, very subtle. I haven't had a couple times.
Because that was your conscious. That was a conscious.
Right. Yes. You're a little more conscious and abrupt with that. Yes. But a couple times I've had literally people say something because I'm casual English, make a comment, but 99% of the time, it's the small way they react that lets me know they just judged me. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to go into that meeting and be rude. But when I have the both and, when I realize that there's 2 experiences in our societal system, and both are valid, that changes. Once I gain awareness and I'm like, ooh, I just did the one picture phenomenon, then I can use the tool pause. Jody, hit the pause button. And then in our next episode, now we're going to go there because you brought this up. So listeners,
Nice.
we're going to hit our next episode, is how to process the feelings that come up. Because when we hit the pause button, you even heard me. When I hit the pause button in the parking lot, I was like, Jody, you did not just do that. Like I felt, bad and guilty. And so we'll talk about that in the next episode.
I love it.
Right? But what we've covered so far is having that both and. Like I was able to hit the pause button and go, oh my gosh, I just did that. Yeah. And you know what? Both and valid. Both experiences are valid. It's not about either or, right?
Yeah.
And I was able to then increase my capacity so that I could show up to listen, because that's what we want to do when we gain awareness, is to listen. Yeah. But it was listen to understand where she's coming from.
Yes.
So I had to put myself in check, okay, let's listen to who she is and where she's coming from, not listen to respond. Because if I didn't catch myself, like you just role modeled it. If I didn't catch myself, we'd be listening to respond. Oh, you got a PhD. Oh, okay.
Man.
Right? That would be a listening to respond.
And I just want to interject real quick, because I love how you said like the building capacity, right? Because I have been in rooms where I've had some friends who, what you call the uppity friends, who give me the space.
We love you, uppities.
All of y'all.
Oh.
But they give me the space, right? And from that moment, when they've caught themselves and they've pressed the pause buttons and they've expanded, I have been able to feel it. And then there's a learning experience that is so amazing. Like I learned so much more language, right? Because now they're sharing.
Yes.
So it's when we do press that pause button and we're aware and we're ready to do that next step by giving that space, like it has been a beautiful thing for me.
Well, and that's when our circles get larger, because now we can have people with different experiences, different identities be our friends.
It's the best experience ever.
Because this happened between you and I before. It's
Yes,
like I
it
operated
has.
on my experience, and I'm like, oh, let me
I'd be like,
pause,
girl.
right.
And then we start the learning
Yes.
experience. We start sharing,
Yep.
and it's like, no, this is how I grew up. Well, this is what I learned. Oh,
Yep.
so that's what that. Yes, it becomes a beautiful dance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And so for listeners, going back to our question, when someone tells you something about their identity and it makes you go, huh, a lot of times why we go, huh, is because the picture we have held for that person doesn't match the identity they just gave us. And so then question, oh, wait a second. Did the picture I just give that person, was it the one picture phenomenon? Because I know like maybe 3 things about their identity and they're all normalized dominant, did I assume then that they would hold these other normalized dominant identities? And when they told me they didn't, did I go, huh? And that's where I see, like I said, when normalized dominant people who have a lot of normalized dominant identities talk about they have a pretty serious criminal background. I love watching the room. The room's like, oh, okay. You know, and cause everybody's like, oh, right? Because they didn't see it coming.
Yes.
You know, and so are we hitting the pause button, realizing we did that one picture phenomenon, operating out of the both and so that we can show up with more capacity to listen, to understand. That's what then allows us to have diverse experiences at the table, and we're constantly learning, and it makes us so much larger instead of shrinking.
Which is what we're about on this show.
Amen.
It's building capacity.
It takes all of us to make this world go around, whether we like it or not.
It really does. And we're saying uppity out of fun.
Oh,
right?
my gosh.
Just want y'all to know that.
We
Like,
both
my
got
friends
uppity
are my
side.
friends.
And we both got uppity sides. She acting like she ain't got an uppity side. Look at this. That's got an uppity side. You know, I do have an uppity side.
Listen, I told you I could rock with the president or I can with the homies.
There you go. There you go. Yes. You should see the charger she pulled out. It had like little pearls around it. Okay, so when Miss Uppity here talks about uppity, you know, hot kettle black. So,
Jody, this was a dope conversation. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with our listeners?
No, I think it's good, but I would say, listeners, make sure you get the next episode because we're going to talk about, okay, when we get these feelings, because with awareness comes feelings, we're going to talk about what to do with them.
I cannot wait for that episode. Now, capacity builders, this is us, building capacity within ourselves, within our institutions, and within our communities. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be with us, and we are so grateful for it. And guess what? I'll see you in the next one.